The ad was innocuous, almost laughably so. Tucked between pleas for dog walkers and tutors for hire on a university job board, it read simply, "Responsible individual needed for weekend babysitting. Secluded home, excellent pay." For a guy like me, living on a steady diet of instant noodles and the dregs of a student loan, excellent pay was the only part that mattered. I fired off an email, highlighting my, admittedly sparse, experience watching my younger cousins and embellishing my calm under pressure demeanor. I figured it was a long shot. Rich people with secluded homes were probably looking for a prim Mary Poppins type, not a 22-year-old engineering student named Alex who'd spent his last tenner on a round of beers. To my surprise, I got a reply within the hour. It was from a Mrs. Sinclair, and her email was as crisp and formal as a fresh banknote. She requested a video call that evening. And so, at 7 p.m., I found myself sitting up straight, wearing my one respectable shirt, and staring into the pixelated faces of Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair. They were perfect, almost unnervingly so. He, with his salt and pepper hair swept back just so, and she, with a string of pearls that looked more real than my entire student debt. They sat side by side on a plush, cream-colored sofa, a massive dark wood fireplace yawning behind them. "Alexander," Mr. Sinclair began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "we appreciate you making the time." "Of course, Mr. Sinclair. Thanks for considering me." "We're attending a symposium this weekend," Mrs. Sinclair chimed in, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It's a biannual event. We require someone to look after our daughter, Lily, from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon." The pay they offered was staggering, more than I made in a month at my part-time library gig. It was the kind of money that made you ignore the faint, prickling sense of unease that was starting to crawl up my spine. There was something off about them, a sterile, rehearsed quality to their interaction. They didn't seem like a married couple, so much as two business partners closing a deal. "Our Lily is a very quiet child," Mr. Sinclair continued, folding his hands. "She keeps to herself mostly. She won't be any trouble. There are just a few household procedures we need you to be aware of," Mrs. Sinclair added, and this was the first time her polished veneer seemed to crack. A flicker of something, anxiety, fear, darted across her face before being swiftly suppressed. "For your safety, and for Lily's." I nodded, trying to look as responsible as possible. "Absolutely. Whatever you need." Mr. Sinclair leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine through the screen. "We have a list. It's on the kitchen counter. We ask that you follow it to the letter. No exceptions. Can you do that, Alexander?" "Yes, sir," I said, my voice a little too eager. "The money. I just kept thinking about the money. And that's how, 2 days later, I found myself driving down a long, winding gravel road, the trees closing in on either side, forming a dense, dark canopy. The house emerged from the woods like a forgotten relic. It was a sprawling Victorian monstrosity, all sharp gables and dark windows, with a wraparound porch that seemed to sag under the weight of its own history. It was the kind of house that had a name, and probably a few ghost stories to go with it. The Sinclairs greeted me at the door, dressed in matching charcoal travel attire. In person, their perfection was even more unsettling. Not a hair out of place, not a crease in their clothes. They smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something metallic and cold. Then I saw Lily. She was a small, pale girl of about 8, standing half hidden behind her mother's leg. Her eyes were large and sorrowful, and she clutched a worn, antique-looking doll with a cracked porcelain face and button eyes. The doll's painted-on smile was a stark, cheerful red that seemed entirely out of place in the somber atmosphere of the house. "This is Lily," Mrs. Sinclair said, gently nudging her forward. Lily didn't say a word, just stared at me with those unnervingly sad eyes. Her doll's head lolled to the side, its button eyes fixed on my face. "And this is Annabelle," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, holding up the doll. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," I said, offering a small, friendly wave that was met with a blank stare. The tour was brief. My room, Lily's room, the kitchen. "The list is on the counter," Mr. Sinclair reminded me, his hand on the doorknob. "We must be going, or we'll miss our flight." They said their goodbyes to Lily with a strange formality, a pat on the head from him, a light touch on the shoulder from her. There were no hugs, no kisses. It was like they were leaving a package for collection. Then they were gone, their sleek black car crunching down the gravel drive and disappearing into the twilight. The silence that descended was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that you only find in places far from the city's hum. The house seemed to exhale around me, a long, slow breath of dust and secrets. I was alone. Well, alone with a silent little girl and her creepy doll. I walked over to the kitchen counter, my footsteps echoing on the polished wood floors. There it was, a single sheet of thick cream-colored paper, the same as their sofa. The rules were typed in a crisp, simple font. Household rules 1. Lily's bedtime is promptly at 9 p.m. Once she's in her room, you are not to open her door for any reason until 7 a.m. the following morning. She might call out for you. You must ignore her. 2. All doors and windows must be locked after sunset. Do not, under any circumstances, open the door for anyone. We are not expecting visitors. 3. You are welcome to anything in the pantry and refrigerator. However, do not consume the homemade sweets in the red tin on the counter. They are for Lily, and she is very particular about them. 4. If you hear crying from the attic, pay it no mind. This is an old house. The pipes make noises. 5. At precisely 10 p.m., go to the grandfather clock in the main hall. Open the small panel at its base and wind it exactly 3 times. No more, no less. 6. On the mantelpiece, you will find a small, ornate music box. If it begins to play on its own, take it to the basement immediately and leave it there. Do not listen to the full melody. 7. Do not look out of any windows after midnight. 8. Lily's doll, Annabelle, must remain with her at all times. Do not touch the doll, and do not allow it out of your sight when you are with Lily. 9. If you happen to see a tall, slender man in a dark suit standing at the edge of the property, do not acknowledge him. He is merely a watcher. Do not stare. I read the list twice, a nervous laugh bubbling in my chest. It had to be a joke, right? Some weird test for the new babysitter. The watcher? Don't open the door for Lily even if she calls. It was absurd. The eccentricities of the ultra-rich, I told myself, trying to brush off the cold knot that was tightening in my stomach. Old pipes, sure. The first few hours were awkward. I tried to engage Lily, suggesting we play a game or watch a movie. She just shook her head, her eyes fixed on the television screen, where a cartoon I didn't recognize flickered silently. She hadn't turned the volume up. Annabelle sat in her lap, her head tilted, that painted smile seeming to widen in the dim light. I made us some dinner, mac and cheese from a box, a taste of my world in this palace of oddities. Lily barely touched hers. She just moved the noodles around her plate with her fork. The whole time, she kept her other hand firmly on Annabelle's back. As the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the manicured lawn, I went around the house, locking the doors and windows as instructed. The heavy thunk of each deadbolt echoed through the silence, each one making the house feel more like a prison than a home. At 8:45, I told Lily it was time to get ready for bed. She complied without a word, her small hand in mine as we walked up the grand, creaking staircase. Her room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. It was pink and frilly, filled with toys that looked untouched, gathering dust. The only thing that seemed to have ever been played with was Annabelle. I tucked her into bed, her small frame almost lost in the massive four-poster. "Good night, Lily," I said, trying to sound cheerful. She just stared at me, her eyes wide. "You won't forget the rules, will you?" she whispered. "I won't forget," I promised, a shiver tracing its way down my spine. I closed the door behind me, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud. I walked downstairs and slumped onto the cream-colored sofa, the silence pressing in on me once more. It was 9:15 when I first heard it. "Alex?" It was Lily's voice, small and wavering, coming from upstairs. My first instinct was to jump up and go to her. What if she was sick? What if she'd had a nightmare? Rule number 1. Once she is in her room, you are not to open her door for any reason. She might call out for you. You must ignore her. I hesitated, my heart thumping against my ribs. This was ridiculous. It was a child, scared in the dark. But the Sinclairs' faces flashed in my mind, their cold, serious eyes. Follow it to the letter. "Alex, I'm scared." Her voice came again, a little louder this time, laced with a tremor of real fear. I squeezed my eyes shut, a wave of guilt washing over me. What kind of person ignores a terrified child? But the money and the unsettling feeling that these rules were here for a reason I couldn't comprehend. I stayed put, my knuckles white, as I gripped the armrest of the sofa. The calling turned to pleading, then to soft, heartbreaking sobs. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that returned was worse somehow. It felt heavy with an unspoken accusation. To distract myself, I decided to explore a little. I wandered through the downstairs rooms, my hand trailing along the cool, polished wood of the furniture. I noticed that all the mirrors, even the small decorative ones, were draped with heavy, dark cloths. Why would anyone cover all their mirrors? I found myself back in the upstairs hallway, drawn to Lily's door. I knelt, my eyes scanning the polished wood. Near the bottom, almost invisible in the dim light, were scratches, long, deep gouges in the wood, as if an animal had been trying to claw its way in or out. My blood ran cold. Shaken, I retreated to the kitchen, deciding a snack would calm my nerves. My eyes fell on the red tin on the counter. Rule number 3. Do not consume the homemade sweets. They are for Lily. My curiosity, now a morbid, gnawing thing, got the better of me. My hand trembled as I lifted the lid. The smell that hit me was coppery and faintly sweet. Inside, nestled on a lace doily, were not cookies, not candies, not any kind of sweet I had ever seen. They were small, white, and irregularly shaped. It took my brain a few seconds to process what I was seeing. They were teeth. Small, pearly, human-looking teeth. I slammed the lid back on, a gag rising in my throat. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. What in God's name was going on in this house? My phone alarm buzzed. 10 p.m. The grandfather clock. I moved like a robot, my mind a maelstrom of fear and confusion. I found the clock in the main hall, its pendulum swinging in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. I fumbled with the small panel at its base, my fingers clumsy. I found the window and turned it. 1, 2, 3 times. As the third turn clicked into place, I heard it. A soft, sorrowful cry, seemingly coming from the ceiling above me. The attic. Rule number 4. If you hear crying from the attic, pay it no mind. It sounded like a woman, weeping in despair. It was too real, too human to be the groaning of old pipes. I stood frozen, every nerve ending screaming at me to run, to get out of this house and never look back. But I was trapped, by the rules, by the money, by the sheer, paralyzing terror of it all. A new sound cut through the silence, a faint, tinkling melody. The music box. Rule number 6. If it begins to play on its own, take it to the basement immediately. On the mantelpiece, the small silver box was open, a tiny ballerina spinning slowly as it played its haunting tune. The melody was beautiful, but it was filled with an indescribable sadness that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I snatched it up, the cold metal burning my skin. I didn't want to go to the basement. Every horror movie I'd ever seen screamed at me not to. But the rule, the melody. As I opened the door to the basement, the tune seemed to change, the tinkling notes growing faster, more frantic, almost manic. A wave of musty, damp air washed over me. I flicked on the light switch, revealing a steep set of wooden stairs that descended into darkness. The single bulb at the bottom cast weak, flickering shadows. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my only thought to get rid of the box. The melody was burrowing into my brain, a maddening, repetitive loop. I reached the bottom, a cold, stone-floored room filled with shrouded furniture and cobwebs. I practically threw the music box onto an old, dusty table, and as it clattered against the wood, the melody stopped. I didn't wait. I turned and fled back up the stairs, slamming the heavy door behind me and locking it. I stood panting in the hallway, my heart racing. I tried to rationalize it was all a prank, an elaborate, sick prank by a couple of bored, rich weirdos. They had speakers, timers, hidden devices. It had to be. I collapsed back onto the sofa, my eyes darting around the room, flinching at every creak and groan of the old house. I felt watched. It was an intense, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. My gaze drifted toward the large picture window that overlooked the front lawn. Rule number 7. Do not look out of any windows after midnight. It wasn't midnight yet. Just a quick glance, I told myself. Just to prove there's nothing there. I peered through the glass, into the inky blackness of the night, and I saw him. Just at the edge of the tree line where the manicured lawn met the wild, dark woods, stood a figure. It was a man, tall and impossibly thin, dressed in a dark, formal suit. He was perfectly still, a silhouette against the deeper black of the forest. The Watcher. My breath hitched in my throat. I stumbled back from the window, my mind screaming. This wasn't a prank. This was real. The rest of the night was a blur of terror. I huddled on the sofa, a blanket pulled up to my chin, listening to the sounds of the house. A soft, rhythmic scratching from inside the walls. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps pacing the upstairs hallway. I didn't sleep a wink. The morning brought a temporary reprieve. The sun streamed through the windows, chasing away the darkest of the shadows, and the house felt normal again, almost. Lily came downstairs at 7 a.m. on the dot. She was even paler than the day before, with dark circles under her eyes. She didn't speak, just sat at the kitchen table staring at the red tin of teeth. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't watch TV. She just sat there, clutching Annabelle, whose painted smile seemed to mock my frayed nerves. I tried calling the Sinclairs, straight to voicemail, both of them. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread that the daylight couldn't dispel. I was alone here, truly alone, and the sun was already beginning its slow descent towards the horizon. Night was coming. The second night was a living nightmare. The moment the last ray of sun disappeared, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with a malevolent energy. I put Lily to bed at 9 p.m. This time, she didn't say a word, just climbed into bed and pulled the covers over her head. As I closed her door, I felt a sense of finality, as if I was sealing a tomb. The crying from the attic started almost immediately. It was louder tonight, filled with a raw, desperate agony that tore at my sanity. It was joined by a frantic scratching, the sound of splintering wood. Something was trying to get out. I was sitting on the stairs, my head in my hands, trying to block out the noise when I heard it. "I'm scared, Alex." The voice was a whisper, right behind my ear. I leaped to my feet, spinning around, my heart seizing in my chest. There was no one there, but I had heard it. It was Lily's voice, but it hadn't come from her room. Suddenly, the grandfather clock began to chime. Not once, not twice, but 12 times. Midnight. As the final chime echoed through the house, every light went out. The house was plunged into an absolute suffocating darkness. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely turn on the flashlight. The narrow beam cut through the blackness, shaking in my hand. I swept it across the hallway, and my blood turned to ice. All the cloths had been removed from the mirrors. I pointed the light at the large, ornate mirror on the wall opposite me. My own terrified face stared back, pale and gaunt. But for a split second, just over my shoulder, I saw another face. A twisted, screaming visage of a woman with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. I cried out, stumbling backward, and the face was gone. My reflection was alone again. A loud crash erupted from the basement, making me jump out of my skin. It sounded like wood splintering, metal screeching. My mind screamed at me to stay put, to hide, to follow the damn rules. But I was past rational thought. I was a cornered animal, and the only way out was through. I ran to the basement door. It was ajar, a sliver of darkness in the wall. The lock had been shattered from the inside. The music box. I could hear its faint, tinkling melody again, coming from the depths of the house. And then, another sound. A sound that will haunt me until the day I die. A blood-curdling scream from Lily's room. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated terror, and it was cut short by a man's deep, guttural laugh. That was it. The rules were broken. To hell with the rules. I bolted up the stairs, my own terrified shouts echoing in the cavernous house. I reached Lily's door, and without a second's hesitation, I broke the first and most important rule. I threw it open. The room was empty. The window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the cold night air. The bed was empty. Lily was gone. No, not entirely empty. Sitting propped against the pillows, its head turned to face the door, was Annabelle. And its smile, its painted, cheerful red smile was gone. In its place was a grotesque, jagged grin, stretched wide as if in a silent scream. And on the wall above the bed, scratched deep into the plaster, were 2 words: "Our turn." A horrifying realization dawned on me, a truth so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. The rules, they weren't to protect me from the house. They were to protect the house from me. They were a ritual, a set of instructions to keep thems at bay. The crying woman in the attic, the watcher, the thing in the mirrors. I was the offering. The babysitting gig was a lure. A slow, deliberate creak from downstairs, the front door. My blood froze in my veins. Heavy, measured footsteps began to ascend the main staircase. I'm writing this now on my phone, huddled in the back of a dusty wardrobe in a spare bedroom. The footsteps stopped a few minutes ago, right outside this door. I can hear breathing, a deep, ragged, inhuman sound, like air being forced through rusted pipes. The doorknob is turning, slowly, so slowly. The Sinclairs are not coming back. There is no symposium. There is only this house and the things that live inside it. I don't know what they've done with Lily or how many other babysitters came before me. I just know it's my turn. If you're reading this, if somehow this gets out, don't ever answer an ad for a secluded house with excellent pay. Don't ever think the rules don't apply to you. The door is opening. Goodbye.